All right, so I guess we can get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Haley Troy, and I'm a research coordinator here at the Center for mHealth and Social Media. I'm honored today to introduce Dr. Debs Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh is an associate professor of geography at UConn. She is also a PI of the Institute on Collaboration for Health Intervention and Policy and affiliated with Yale University Center for Interdisciplinary Research on AIDS. As a health geographer, Debs' research and teaching are primarily focused on the reciprocal relationship between place and health. Central to this is her diverse yet complementary skill set, including GIS, spatial statistics, social network analysis, mobile health, and more recently, designs of randomized controlled trials. Her current research, funded by NIH and foundations, among others, include effect of connections between people, places, and risks on the interface of substance abuse and HIV/AIDS, as well as mobile technology systems for medication adherence, accessibility of healthcare in the US, Uganda, and India, and disproportionate effects of housing foreclosures on community health. Thank you for joining us today. I will now turn things over to Dr. Ghosh.
Thanks, Haley, for the introduction, and thanks to Sherry Pagado, the director of the center, to invite me to give this webinar on GIS for social media research opportunities and challenge. So I'm excited to be here and then talk about the topic. So what I'll do now is I'm going to go to the full presentation mode here. Can everybody see the screen and hear me properly? Few of thumbs up would be good for me. Thank you. So what I want to do in the next 40 to 45 minutes is give a very brief intro of GIS. What is Geographic Information Science Systems and Society? I don't want to take a whole lot of time there because that could be itself a webinar topic. But then quickly jump into this overlap of GIS and social media, especially on Twitter data, and talk about some of the exciting opportunities that this overlap brings. That comes with a list of challenges as well, and go through this potential opportunities and examples through examples of some of the current work from the literature, as well as some of my work in GIS and social media. One kind of a study that I did a few years back, and coming back again to Twitter work with COVID, with the COVID data. And I want to wrap up by a couple of slides, which gives the truth, challenges, and the next steps of where this overlap of GIS and social media research is going. So what is GIS, and what is this S that I'm emphasizing? So there are 3 S's here, which you probably not have heard before, some of the audience, if you're not from the GIS science literature. So Geographic Information Science is an interdisciplinary research field which studies the concepts and theories to analyze spatial data. As you can see, it has some core fields like geography, cartography, geometry, geodesy. But over the years, with lots of collaboration and exciting work, other fields have also come into this and contributing significantly in a very meaningful way. Computer science, spatial statistics, maths, cognitive science, information science, health science. So all those fields are joining, and that leads to this whole list of application areas. I just listed a few of them here, but if you see if you are reviewing the current literature, you will see a wide spectrum of application areas. GI systems, which is another S of that 3 letters, is a powerful technology to store, retrieve, analyze, and display spatial data. Most of this overlap between GIS or any other field, say social media or health, focuses more on this GIS systems part. However, I do want to emphasize on the other S's because that gives the backbone of it. So the science part gives the theories and the concepts, which gives the foundation to do GIS analysis using the spatial data. And then is this society, that is the third S of GIS here. Understanding the social, legal, and ethical issues associated with the application of theories from science to applications in the GIS systems. So you have your theories here, you have the functions, but we have to also be aware and cognizant about some of the social, ethical, and legal aspects of this kind of research. And in the recent times, we are seeing more of those discussions and considerations of how we can keep privacy, how and the confidentiality of the data, how we could be careful about misinformation being spread and things like that. So it is a very, very important part. So any application of GIS, in my opinion, should be a balance of these three S's. Of course, in some real projects, we focus on one over the other. Sometimes maybe we only focus on the methods, which is fine. But knowing that a good ethical, sound research would have all the three S's incorporated. So saying that, since most of our overlap with GIS and social media research as of now kind of falls into this box here, there are three basic concepts. So G is the geographic part of it, linking where something is located on the earth. Majority of my talk would be around this part here. And then what information? This is the part where the social media, this is voluminous text data that we get from different social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and all a combination of text and video. That is this what part, what information. And then you have this systems, which is to manage, use, and analyze the spatial data or the location data, which is the link here between this two field of GIS and social media. This is that first point of contact for this two disciplinary field to come in and give an interdisciplinary flavor to the research questions, and the availability of a location-based text data from social media opens up many new opportunities. And what is facilitating this overlap more so in the current time, this connected technology and the smart technology and the advancement that is having we are seeing in that field, starting from cell phones, where we had cell phones which were not that smart, but now we can do so much with our cell phones, other kind of mobile devices, all the smart watches and so forth, which has really facilitating or making this location data much more available in number, and therefore this overlap is becoming more exciting, useful, as well as it has some other challenges and issues as well, but it comes with all that. So with that, I'm going to be focusing on the GIS, of course, and among the social media, different avenues of social media, I'm going to focus on the Twitter, and mostly this first point of contact. What is the location data? How do we get most of it? What are some of the issues that we need to know, and where the field is going in terms of the location data? The field, or the overlap field, has seen a tremendous amount of literature, and there's a significant body of work done across multidisciplinary and overlapping fields and application areas. Here I just have a handful of them. This is just I selected few that is related to the topic or the things that I'm going to talk about or expand in this talk. So the first one is done by geographers in the GIS science, that first S that I talked about. It's the spatial, temporal, and socioeconomic patterns in the use of Twitter and Flickr. As you would know from the word Flickr here, this is some of the older work here. It's in the year of 2010, 2011. Flickr has faded away and is taken over by Instagram, TikTok, the video part of the social media. But this work showed the ways where other data sets can be merged with location-defined Twitter feeds, like the census, other administrative data at the national level. It was very useful at that time. But over the years, we have seen that is the Twitter data first, and second, the geolocated Twitter data, is that representative that we bring in other data sets? That is an open, challenging question here. But it did show that we could do this, but then the research community then thought more about it, and perhaps we are not, there are some still open windows to know how well, we can merge any data set, but what it is doing in terms of our understanding and interpretations, we need to be careful about that. The second one is done by a group of, again, geographers and data scientists from George Mason University, and I believe they're still continuing active work in Twitter and social media. They actually were among the first who talked about this virtual communities, and that is another opportunity that GIS and social media can bring in. So we know that in the media space, social media space, there is a formation of virtual communities. But can these virtual communities can be an approximation of our real world communities? They have done some good base work on that and how they do it. And their focus is on more on like time sensitive events. So if an event is happening in the world or in a particular country, how does communities form virtually through the use of Twitter, and how, and if there is any possibility of comparing that with the real space communities, let's say that. Then there is this set of application areas. My work also falls along this line. This is both on cancer. I have done work on obesity, and the current work is on COVID. This is where all kind of goes beyond just looking at the tweets on a map. So what, right? What are some of the prospective part? We have understood how cancer is being talked in the Twitter space. You will shortly see how obesity are discussed at the Twitter space. But then so what? What are we doing about it after this descriptive part? There is a spectrum of work on prospective and interventions. I don't think we have done a lot yet, and that's where the excitement and the collaboration with health information or digital health can be very important to see. Well, we have identified few virtual communities which could have association with real space communities, but then try out some interventions. And then this last piece here, which is the revisiting the death of geography in the era of big data. So this article came around the time, and you can see the year here, 2017, where this social media, high volume, contextual text data is moving into this big data science words and realm. So now it is all in the big data, but in this era of big data, are we losing real space impact, or the death of geography? Interestingly, this article showed that estimating the distance decay, which is a concept used in geography, it is also a concept used in several social sciences like transport, statistics as well, because we have the distance decay functions. So it brings those theories together. Estimating the distance in cyberspace in this study can help predict the degree of information flow across space through social media. Now, and this part is where most of the current excitement is going with this, how information is spreading, um, and how network analysis, information science, all those can be brought into. But can we also see that information space in the real world? Can we identify communities where that information or misinformation is spreading? And can we do something to prevent that, or rather bolster it by targeted PSAs, campaigns, and things like that? So that is, again, this question of what's happening next with the GIS and social media. So with that, what I'm going to do is now move into one of my study, which was done, you can see, quite 6 to 7 years back. So it's done one of those time where excitement was there, and I worked with my collaborator as a side project. But till now, it is still my highly cited paper, around 200 citations. And if I just do like a systematic analysis of the paper cited here, it's going to be so revealing. You can see that the application areas that I was talking about. But some of the challenges is still there, and I'm seeing that in my current. It is not, Twitter is not my Twitter and GIS is not my dominant research field, but I'm also currently got involved into misinformation spread and COVID-19 with other colleagues at UConn, which I'm going to give some examples. So for this one, we wanted to see what are the obesity-related themes, spatial pattern of the identified themes, what we can do next with that, and some of the challenges. And I said I will focus on the challenges because I want um, the current research community to kind of know these challenges. This is the, if you are browsing that paper, you will see the same figure there. This is just a flow of work of the methods here. And I'm going to focus the parts that had the link with the GIS. So the first point of contact is geocoding of the tweets. The geocoding is a formal word or used to formal definition of how a tweet is associated with a location. Uh, Nowadays, we use many words like geotagging, georeferencing, geolocation, all the same. But the formal word in the GI Science Dictionary is the geocoding. So that is where we have to do our best work. Without our data, we cannot do any other stuff here. Then this is the second collaboration, where many new things are happening: space-time visualization, web mapping, all the cool visualization, the mashups, all the animations, all can be done here and in this one. And then, depending upon the study you do for this one, we did topic modeling, which is not the focus of this webinar, but this is the part where every project will have their own stuff going on. But at the end, you could bring back GIS again and show the results in a map, on a figure, or in a spatial way, using spatial analysis, merging with other data sets, thinking about what next, thinking about maybe some health interventions, and so on. So in my opinion, and in my experience of GIS and social media, these are the three areas or parts where GIS can play an active role. Now, this is the part where Twitter has done very well in terms of documentation, and I'm sure there are several readings and webinars in general how to search a Twitter API to get the tweets. I'm not going to go into that, but focus more on this second part here. So for this study, and it is our obesity work, so we use this search terms, list of search terms here. And you can see some of the examples of the search terms: childhood and obesity, eat and right, farm policy. And these are the tweet counts for each of these search combinations. And these are all geocoded tweets. So how did I go about geocoding the tweets? For each tweet we send, Twitter includes two types of location, one at the tweet level and one at the general location of the user. You might think that this distinction, you may or may not be aware of this distinction, but it is very important to know these differences when you merge external data sets or you consider what visualization technique should I do, because it has a spectrum of error or approximation when you go from one level to another. And the most important sentence here is Twitter users opt in to share location. So first of all, if in the audience you work with Twitter or any other social media, first of all, that particular social media organization will have a way of giving public use data or for research use, and those policies change. So we don't get the full set, we get a subset. Of that subset, there is a geolocated or geocoded tweet. So we need to be aware that that data size is becoming narrow or small or on the smaller side. It's still big, but there is a possibility of not having enough data for a given work. So this is the most important, is the opt-in to share location. So for the obesity study, I have this kind of a summary figure here when I have two levels of the location. At the tweet level, you get the latitude and the longitude of where the tweet was posted from. So this is important to know that I may live in Boston area, but I'm traveling in India, so I am posting tweets from India. So when anybody is using my information or posts at their Twitter, which location to use. And that is going to be dependent on the research question. Maybe at some point that distinction is not necessary in terms of what I think about COVID, what I think about our election, what I think about a certain health outcomes might be same when I am in India or in the US or I'm traveling somewhere else. But for some study, this distinction is important. So when you get the latitude, which is X and Y at the tweet level, it is the most reliable. And I will show you some examples. It is also very hard to get all for the whole data set that you extract from the Twitter because it is self-opted. And the range is from 0.25 to 0.5% of your extract. But we are researchers, right? So we have tenacity and patience, and we have to persevere because there are a lot of challenge. There are lots of good things of having doing this overlap of GIS and spatial questions with your social science. So we don't want to be discouraged by this, but we need to be aware of that. So there is another way of getting the geolocation is to go at the user profile. So when we sign up for Twitter and we make an account, there is an option of whether, again, an option, whether to talk about our location. And since it's an option, it can range from your address, it can like exact address, intersection of the two roads, or just a neighborhood name, to city, state, only state, only country. So there, and you can see if you are in the realm of GIS and geography, you can see as you go from neighborhood to city, state to state, you are incorporating more error and approximation of that location of that tweet or the user. Sorry, here it will be the user. For example, Twitter now have stopped giving this, they have deprecated this information on UTC offset and time zone. They have some other more easily available columns nowadays. But if you had only city name, there could be possibility of two cities, same name in a country. How would I know which one to choose? At that point, you can compare or take use of the other information, UTC offset, the time zone, to say, okay, I know this city is developing upon this time zone, so it is maybe from the eastern side of the United States versus west. If you are only provided with the state, you can understand If there are 100 Twitter user profiles in one state, everybody will be located with one point in the state of Connecticut, for example. How do I make that any spatial analysis with that kind of aggregated at one location in the state? But it's still useful if your exact location is not needed for your project, it's fine. But if it is needed, then you are around this realm of data here. For obesity paper, combining these two approaches, we were able to get around 22.5 to 3% of geocoded tweets for each of our search terms. So it was pretty good. And again, we were talking about obesity, which is it's not it's a topic that spreads all over the country if you are or even beyond. But if you want to do some specific area work, then all these numbers will go down further. For our study, we got this, but in general, combining different ways of scraping geolocation data from the tweets lands us around 1% to 1.5%. So you can imagine that you have to start extracting of all tweets at a big number so that your 1 to 1.5% is still big enough to do whatever you want to do in your research. So in my current work, where we are looking into misinformation clusters in COVID-19 outbreaks, and I'm working on this project with my colleagues from computer science and political science because we want to bring in contextual information of politics and things like that, which is very much related to what is going on in the COVID-19. So here are our 4 questions here. We have just started it. We're still in this first phase here. So what I want to do now is I'm going to show you some raw data of how when you extract the tweets from the Twitter space and you do some basic manipulation, which means you go from JSON object, which is the way the Twitter gives you the tweets and all the information, and then you transform that into a CSV. There are many tools to do that. Python will have libraries, R will have libraries. So, and Twitter documentation gives a very good list of those. So I have a snapshot of my Excel spreadsheet here. You can see the column names, which also Twitter explains what those, but this is the place name. So all these, place name, full name, place type, country, country code, these are all at the Twitter level here. And you can see there are NAs, we don't have the latitude and longitude. Maybe we have it from other ways that the cell phone or the smartwatch was, however the user was using it, got some information. Then on this side, on the right here, you see this location column. This is that is coming from the user when we sign up. So, and you can see a lot of variation. So if I want to escape, not stop sharing, rather escape out and go to some of the, right. So this is one of our spreadsheet here. You can see Mile High City. Now, they didn't say Denver, they just said Mile High City. Then when I was doing my obesity work, I was still new in this country at that point. So I learned a lot of local colloquial names of the city. Maybe I know a lot now, but at that time, and I also found out some of the loose slang words used for some of the cities here, what they mentioned. So it was interesting one for the obesity work. But here you can see how many NAs you have here in terms of the if the geocodes, which is the latitude and the longitude here, right? And I want to also show some variation of the location here. So you have the Great Lakes. Great Lakes is huge area. Where do you put your point on a map for the Great Lakes? Florida, whole state. USA, whole country. Then, well, somebody loves New York, so it's a New York with an exclamation. So So you can see the variation here, what I was talking about, that there are lots of errors that you incorporate when you want to maximize your geolocated. Here is another example here. Under the location field, so when the user was signing up, I was saying on the dark side of the moon. No idea. So all these rows, if I'm only want to focus on geolocated tweets for this research, this has to go away. And there's no way I could make use of these tweets here. Maybe this tweets where you have the text here, maybe have some important information here. But if I'm only working with geolocated tweets, I cannot make use of it. So this is what I just want to show some of the challenges that we face in this box of geocoding. It doesn't mean that it is not impossible to do it or we shouldn't do it, but knowing this, validating it, spending some more time, which of course takes away from the automation of big data to some manual curation. But without that, I'm very skeptical of what comes out of at the end of any studies. So whenever I'm reviewing any Twitter-based paper, I focus more, how did you manage these challenges? It's not going away, but how did you manage it? And that's where maybe we have to do more work. So the next step where the overlap comes in is the GIS of social media, is the visualization. For this work, it was not very fancy. It was just temporal distribution of where we did our collected the tweets. Interestingly, for this search term, overweight and obesity, it has an interesting spike here in the date, and you can see this is around that week of Thanksgiving. So we are excited to meet families at this, but we're also and eat food, but we're also kind of talking about that in our Twitter space. So it was interesting to see that. Here is a visualization. I dumped all geolocation tweets on a map. It's just the first step, doesn't mean a lot. This shows the distribution here, but you have to do more to make it meaningful. A point distribution makes no sense. So we have to do, this is where the field has a potential. How can you show this pattern in a more meaningful way, bringing time, some other cool work of density analysis, hotspot analysis, heat maps. These are simple ones where I wanted to show that cluster pattern than just the points. We can also bring in other data sets and compare. This was the one with only the word, I guess this few search terms. But then if you compare that with the obesity level among adults around that time, you can see some pattern. I specifically have this slide on to show an error here. So then that's what I want to say, that it is important to know at which level I am geocoding the data and which level I'm showing my visualizations or with other data sets. So this is at the tweet level. So either I got the geolocation from the tweets or I got from the users, doesn't matter, but they're all point. And this map is at the counties. How am I comparing this? And I've seen so much of work in the Twitter mixing the scale here. And that's why it is important to go back to basic concepts in geography and geometry and all that to know, am I doing justice in bringing a point to a county map and comparing? That was my thinking to show this. We shouldn't be doing and showing this kind of thing here. Here is another example, which is not my study, but economists at Facebook, Harvard, and Princeton, New York University, they did, and I have it hyperlinked here. This banner. So this is done with the Facebook data, but we can also do that with the Twitter. What they did is, how connected is your community to everywhere else in America? Very cool. Very, very cool visualization here. So you choose a county, and let's say Fairfax. Connecticut? See, well, it went somewhere else. Oh, Fairfield, sorry, Fairfield County from Connecticut. So I want to see how that county is connected to the other, and you can see some of the data here. So, so every county is connectivity of every county is shown by the friends and followers of the Facebook account from that county. So this is how the data was processed, and here you see very cool visualizations here, and they have some interpretation from there, where for some states and some counties, the administrative state lines was very distinguishing. You can see a sharp drop of connectivity after that. History remains very visible. If there has been a migration of a certain ethnic group from one part of the country to another, it will say that the connections will still remain virtually. So you will have that friends, and you can see how these two areas were connected. Same here. This is the Detroit area, and you have moved. Some communities have moved from the south to the Detroit area. And then you have some physical boundaries like a state park or Appalachian Mountains would be another example here. So these kinds of visualizations using social media data is really an area where the excitement and the potential is, and where this overlap is very, very meaningful and useful. And this brings back to this article that I said is revisiting the death of geography in the era of big data. No, it is not. It is important to see, and some of the conclusions from this work is that even in the age of the internet, virtual space, distance matters immensely in determining whom, and as a result, what we know and where we know. And when we were all living virtually during the COVID 2020, we kind of felt the need of going out and being physically in the communities, walk and things like that. So real space geography is not going away. Rather, it is becoming more interesting to combine with other kinds of spaces. This brings to me the last part here, where you do all analysis and then bring in some other data sets. So in this study, we using the latent derelict allocation topic modeling, we found some topics, and those were categorized in these 4 themes: childhood obesity in school, prevention, and food habits. So what did we do next with that? We just didn't want it to stop there. So we went more into those tweets and see which areas we were talking more about the school lunches. And it happens to be that this was that LA area where you have a lot of interventions, or local communities were working with the LA schools, inner city schools, to improve lunches. Jamie Oliver has all some of the things, his work is there. So this came up during that time. There was another cluster here, which they were talking about why pizza and the tomato sauce over the pizza, which is provided in the schools, was considered to be a vegetable. It's just a sauce. It's not the equivalent to any vegetable intake in our diet. So we did this kind of analysis, and then this is a correlation at the state level, where we aggregated the tweets and we ran some top level correlation to see if there was any correlation with the prevention policies of some states which are much more aggressive than the others. Perhaps it will show some examples to other states to adopt if they can, or if their health and policy allows them to do. Obesity and food. So what food goes there? This is was not a very new revelation. We know all about corn and high fructose corn syrup and America and corn and stuff like that. But one idea I got was there, hey, let's map the location of the McDonald's and see what does it do with our tweet location. So here I have the tweets on the left. On the right is the location of all possible McDonald's restaurants at that time when I did the paper. And I did some more analysis to see how many McDonald's were there in a radius, in a given radius from the location of the tweet, right? So here is my location of the tweet. This is the radius. So how many are there in this circle? So I started with several of the search radius, quarter mile, half mile, and so on. And I kind of seen how many average number of McDonald's were there. What is the distance between the nearest or the average distance? So this would fall under the proximity analysis in the GIS science and systems world. So I did that and found some interesting results that you can see in a quarter mile there are two. So that's a lot, and average distance to all McDonald's in that search window was 0.2 miles. So that was kind of quite interesting to see how it can relate to the McDonald's. So what do we conclude from here? So we found some themes with the different kind of analysis, but we saw the spatial picture or the spatial story of those themes by doing some other kinds of analysis, other data sets bringing in. And we found that the pattern of these themes were concentrated in certain areas, and it was concentrated because of what was happening in the physical or the geographic community or space in those areas. Childhood obesity in schools effectively captured the sentiments around the U.S. Congress Agricultural Bill. Obesity and prevention and obesity food Twitter is used to promote both positive and negative behaviors. And of course, it opens up new avenues. So this is my last slide, and I think we're doing good on time for some Q&A. So what are some of the truth, challenges, and next step? There could be more. So these that I always think about when I see more work on GIS and Twitter or GIS and or Facebook. The truth is, first, location data is optional. So we just that's what it is. And I agree with that strongly because it should be our option to show whether we want to share that with the Twitter. And I completely agree. But the challenge is how to balance between the privacy policies of the social media bodies and a balance between the mistrust and what we're doing this. And we have seen several of these controversies with Facebook leaking data and things like that. So this is, I don't know where this next step is going. This keeping this balance. Maybe some things can come up at the Q&A. I'm happy to hear your viewpoints, but this will affect how much location data are we getting. And if you remember when I started, that is the first point of contact. That is where our data is coming from. That leads to these open questions here. Do we have enough data? Is this data representative? What is the validity of that data? We have improved a lot in way how we can scrape location data, do some validation, and do some spot checkings. Be aware that some data is going to be lacking in the rural areas, just the way the users of the social media are. Urban areas, so knowing our data and the background is important, but there are things happening. It's an open field. Can anybody predict the location of a tweet? I don't know. But some of the newer minds or research area, it is not my dominant area of work. But a lot of things can be done here if we want to keep this truth in a healthy way, that we want the location data. The next truth is what really excited me when I did my first paper. Then I had a gap and did something else, and I'm doing a current work as well with COVID. Is new avenues of research, and no doubt there are a lot of enthusiasm of that. Web mapping, pattern analysis, linking with other data sets, doing some local work when you kind of understood the virtual impact and what it does in a local area. Maybe at that point you leave the Twitter work, but focus on the community work. Everything doesn't need to be end product, doesn't need to be always with the social media. Social media can facilitate that research, and then we focus on other areas. So these challenges are there, but they're healthy challenges, which keeps the research community active, and yeah, it keeps active and interesting. Intervention research, I always had a question, is social media a conduit of intervention or an intervention by itself? Role of GIS, maybe it's a facilitator here, perhaps not the intervention part. It's I'm not there how we are doing a lot at the intervention step of the research, but we are doing much more at the front, at the back end of how we go to that step. This is area where I'm again drawn to that truth here, interpretations and conclusions. We have to know that the data may not be representative, may not be enough. So all these predictions, forward looking thing, that the place from where person is tweeting in terms of political results, can we predict the political outcome? I'm cautious of that because of how the location data we get from the Twitter. Maybe some are okay, but we need to look that in a research critical way. And that's where I'm going to stop today's talk. Stop sharing and go back to the meeting.
Great. Well, that was an excellent talk, Dr. Ghosh. Really, really interesting and informative. If anybody has questions, perfect. So it looks like someone posted a question here in the chat. Are you able to see it?
Joe, how are we doing? You going to read out the question to me?
Sure, I'm happy to. So we have a question about, could you please talk a little about social media misinformation and location? Are there far fewer locational data available for tweets or posts that contain inaccurate or false information?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I have a definite answer. It's a variable. So if a person who has a negative way of thinking, and you want to keep yourself anonymous, then the person will keep pushing the misinformation to the Twitter and keep the location option off, so we wouldn't be able to know. So there are other ways to look at it. For example, if we know that there are some bad apple in our user and they are spreading misinformation, we could look at the tweet history of that person to see if somewhere he or she or the person or they are talking about some space. But that goes into very focused and kind of NSA level data where we have to follow that group in a very detailed way over time, long history.
We have another question. Is there a program or interface for efficiently plotting latitude and longitude data collected via API?
Yeah, so there are ESRI products which are licensed, but there are several open source Tableau, Postgres, and R can do directly. R has a whole Geo R libraries. Python can do it. So a range of your comfort level of using GUI applications to coding.
Great. Well, I think I'm going to ask you a question from, we had some submitted ahead of time, and there's a good one here, quite a thinker, about anonymized data that can be used to track and identify individuals. So what improvements in digital data infrastructure do you recommend to increase security, and how do you suggest data can be ethically accessed?
So if I put my like a regular citizen hat, don't show your location. So opt out if you are on that side of the spectrum. But if I put on my researcher hat, I do want that location data, and that is where and so I would. It's a personal choice because it's an opt-in. But say if there are users who are doing that, uh, from the researcher point of view, there's no utility of showing those information on a map or sharing because it's just a dot. I don't know a lot, but maybe perhaps you do aggregated analysis and you show that on a map, you share that with the community, that this is what is people are talking virtually in your community, and not pinpoint. So that would be the ethical side. But again, when the research team is working, they have access to the whole data. For example, when I showed you my Excel spreadsheet, there are some latitude and longitude, and if I put it on a map, it will tell me that approximate location. Then, and this ability, which is very exciting, to merge all other data sets, that can also create problem where I could add housing data. I could add um, um, data from, say, purchasing. So all purchasing behavior. So we would know. So knowing this, putting safeguards, talking to IRB, having a dedicated computer where you could save this data, and the research groups that do social media research all the time, they will probably have this workflow all at different time points taken care of. So one point, don't show your location or share, but I can assure that there are ways to protect it. But there's going to be some mishaps as well. If you should know that.
Great, very interesting. And is there anything, I mean, you did touch on this, but since the question came up, are there any additional safeguards you might recommend, or things that your team has worked on when it is data that's focused on more sensitive topics like, let's say, HIV/AIDS, or seems to always be an example that's given out?
Right. So you remember that Twitter is anyway public. So forget about geolocation or not location. So whatever, that is another thing. Whatever we are saying, it's public to begin with. So, and anybody can use anything. So if the user is sharing it, you're already sharing it to the whole world. But when I use the metadata or additional information of the space, maybe the user is not aware of how data linkages can say many things about that person. So we try to put that into, as a section wherever we work, that this is how we safeguarded that. So Twitter, sometimes when we share things on on our social media, we forget that it is already public. So so it's already there. So extra steps should be taken, but mishaps can happen.
Sure. And we definitely saw that a huge percentage, the great majority of the tweets that you look at are not geocoded. And so do you notice any sort of systematic biases when looking at content that do have geocodes and content that does not?
Yeah, this is a very good question. Again, open to new research to see if the systematic way of some users not showing. Well, you did plant a good idea that maybe we could see which tweets in general. So it will be at the user. So which user is opting in? Is that person from a particular age where these critical things are not there, or at the other end, we are totally unhappy with what's happening at the social media space. So we want to not show any of our location. So we can do that study. We can find out, but to me, there's no pattern as of now.
Great. I do have a few other questions that have come through the chat that I will pose to you. So someone wants to know, do you tend to combine tweet location and user locations in the same analyses? And what might be some things to consider when combining these two types of locational data?
Yeah, that's a question I can answer there. So in a project where exact location is not important, or considering the traveling or migration, people have mobility, let's say mobility. Mobility is not that important, then you could do both. Because what you're doing is you are increasing the proportion of your geolocated tweets and having more power and more data to play around to do all your good stuff in your methods. But if in a place where the location is very important, then you cannot mix these two, because as I said in an example, person could be uh, traveling and posting somewhere else. So you don't know. So if the tweet was from that location, if you're answering some location specific questions, then that is not the good habit. Another thing to consider at the user level, as you saw some examples, there might be many dark side of the moon. There was location. I might sign up for Twitter and say, I live in Texas, but I don't, but in reality I live. So that is also there. One way of answering that, and almost all Twitter researchers say that just the volume of the tweets is so high. So in terms of the general rule of big data and noisy data, those kind of easily taken care of. But if your project is looking at a very particular time sensitive topic and you have less number of tweets, then these considerations of which tweet to keep, which to delete, it becomes important.
Great. Well, I think we can go ahead and wrap up then. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Ghosh, for your time today and all the information you shared. Where can people reach you if they have other questions and they want to continue chatting?
Oops, I did not have my Yukon email, so I can put that into the chat.
Sounds good. So while you're putting that in the chat, I'll let everyone know that a recording of this webinar is available on YouTube now, just in case you wanted to go back and watch something again. It's on our website, so mhealth.inchip.yukon.edu. There's a tab for webinars, and you'll see it in the past webinars. You can access everything there. And then perfect, we see Dr. Ghosh has put her email address in the chat. So thank you all so much for coming, and thank you again, Dr. Ghosh, for this wonderful presentation today.
Thank you for listening to my research and for the great questions, and keep working in this new area of collaboration.